Chicago over Chicago's vast economic empire, which is basically the whole range of the old Buffalo. All of the Great Plains, 1,000 miles south, west, and north. These are the parts of the country that bought stuff from Chicago off of the train tracks. Here on the right, this sort of pink big box, this brick box here on the right is weirdly the oldest building we're going to see on this whole tour. Doesn't look that old because it was renovated. It is apartments now. This was a big ice box, just a massive freezer for Chicago's beef industry back in the day. They would take dressed beef products and put them on refrigerated train cars. Hey, what's up? We got a guy jumping up and down. Check out how thick those brick walls are. That's the white part on these patios. When they turned it into apartments, it took 6 months to melt all the ice, and they had to cart off 500 trucks full of horsehair and cork. And so they're using to insulate it. Beautiful Chicago flag flying over the metro trains back there. Those are suburban commuter trains. The way that our meat industry here worked was with massive, massive numbers in technology. Stuff like refrigerated train cars, but also just huge numbers. If you're a rural butcher, you have one dead bull, you're gonna sell the meat, you can maybe sell the skin, nobody's gonna buy the bones, nobody's gonna buy the horns, nobody's gonna buy the hooves. If you got 1 million dead bulls, you can open up a glue factory, use the profits from that to drive the price down on your beef products, drive every local butcher in the country out of business. That is exactly what Chicago meat packers did. And then that's what our catalog store owners did with general stores. Businesses like Montgomery Ward and eventually Sears Roebuck would use their catalog shopping to drive every local corner store in the country out of business using trains. Chicago became Chicago, yes, because of the lakes and the rivers, but mostly the trains. You look at any train map of the United States, Chicago is sort of right in the middle. This is the center of the Great Wheel. That's why all these factories and warehouse companies set up shop here and turned this into the industrial capital and then population and money capital of the Midwest. Here on the left, we got the Nuveen Tower. This beautiful green and blue glass tower from 1983 is shaped like a quarter wheel. It won some awards in 1983 because it highlights the buildings around it. These big glass ones use that contextualism. They make their neighbors the star of the show. Check out the left piece of the reflection there. That's the Wrigley Building, right? No, that is not the Wrigley Building. That is the Merchandise Mart from 1930, doing an impression of the Wrigley Building from 1924 in the funhouse mirror reflection of the Nuveen Tower from 1983. What does it all mean? It means nothing. It just means architecture is pretty cool sometimes. There's no master plan, but just like in a big city, everybody's completely independent plan comes together and makes something larger than the sum of its parts. That's city life for you. And here on the right, we got 150 North Riverside. It's called, sort of looks like a sharpened pencil from the north and south, on this really skinny spot of land on that Y-shaped foundation. My favorite thing about the design of this building is myself, we can see our own reflection there, and we can wave at the real people. Maybe they'll wave back. If we wave at ourselves, they will definitely wave back, because we're already waving. But your best friend in the world is yourself. Top of this, they have something really cool called slosh dampers. Those are massive tanks of water, hundreds of thousands of gallons that flow freely near the top floor. So when the wind sends the building swaying in one direction, the water goes the other direction, thus stabilizing it. All these super talls are built to sway a little bit. They're kind of like our wooden benches. If they have a little bit of shock absorption, they're stronger than they would be if they were totally rigid. And smell that cheeseburger smell. That is small cheval. I get jealous of those cheeseburger diners every single time. We're still a beef town. The stockyards are gone, but we still eat cheeseburgers. Here on the right's the Boeing Tower. That's a Seattle company. That's not a Chicago company, and they're not even there anymore. They're in Northern Virginia. But you can see who this was built for, a company called Morton's Salt. Check out those holes on the top of the building. It's made to look like a salt shaker. The architect was being cute, and they made the thing kind of look like a big gumball machine. If the architect is trying to be funny or try to make it look like something for children, that's probably from the 1990s. That was a very specific time in Chicago history. I was a little kid then. The Bulls were winning, very specific time. But every one of these towers tells the story, not just of who's there now, but who was there, who ordered it, the design stuff. Like I said, you can read it like a book. Okay, here on the right, the next 5 towers will be a sequential journey through office buildings in space and time. This is the part of the tour I call the Valley of the Pharaohs, 2 massive 1929 Egyptian-style temples of commerce that could have only been built in 1929. First, here on the right is 2 North Riverside. This is a big newspaper office in the style and shape of a train station. This is all polished Indiana limestone on the front, just like you might find on the front of the Empire State Building. Those bas reliefs, those flat carvings, those tell the story of the written word, from etchings on cave walls to hieroglyphics to the age of Gutenberg and beyond. That poet I quoted earlier, Carl Sandburg, he worked here at the Chicago Daily News for a couple of years. And it sort of opens up to the river. This was built, 1929 was a long time before 1973 when we got a Clean Water Act. It basically opened up to a sewer, but it has been waiting for the river to be as clean as it is now. And so we did not make any office buildings during the Great Depression. We did not make any office buildings during World War II. Our productive capacity was tied up elsewhere. But after World War II, we started making these. This is called Gateway Plaza. These next 4 office buildings are owned by the same owners. These first 2 are nice examples of black box modernism, which is the main dominant style of skyscrapers. After World War II, it is just steel plus glass plus nothing. They do not want to pay for the story of Gutenberg. They don't want to pay for carvings or, poetry or whatever. They want a box of boxes rented at a recent price, or a decent price. And then these are both from the 1960s, but that style kind of began in the 50s with a German guy named Mies van der Rohe from the Bauhaus School in Germany. And gateway number 2, I mentioned earlier, the stuff inside the reflection is part of the design. That one's pretty tall. That one looks like the tallest building in the world, maybe. We'll talk about the Sears Tower, especially on the South Branch, when we can see it well. But keep this in mind. Gateway number 2, this building right here, is 27 stories tall. This is as tall as just the antennas are in the Sears Tower. They're way up there, so they look even smaller, but that's what kind of structure we're talking about. These are over the active train tracks for Union Station, or train station, which is coming up on the right. We can see it with all those sort of X's made out of light shining on it that come from the sunshine coming off of those windows on gateway number 3, which is this next one from the 1970s. The gateway number 3 style is the international style, it's called, which can be summed up by saying black box plus white rocks. This is the same style as those first 2, but there's now cladding, and we can enjoy that time outside of the sun right now. This was made to look like it'd be at home in any city on the globe. I think they did that pretty successfully. That is a pretty boring building. It makes me feel nothing, but that's what they were going for. That means it is successful in its unsuccessfulness. Unambitious, but they got it. They hit the nail on the head. Between number 3 and number 4 is this little black box which has the gym and the bakery. You can just go back and forth for your whole career between those 2. Those black X's on the outside are bracings. Those are there instead of pillars. X's on the outside means no pillars on the inside, more square footage, more money, more rent. These are for-profit companies. If you can make architectural fixes that get them more money, they're going to go for that. These are practical money-making groups. And now gateway number 4, it is the 1980s, after Newbie, green blue glass, gently slopes with the river. And I said the stuff in the reflection is part of the design. What is that red thing? Why, that's us. We are here. This is a map. That Y-shaped river confluence on top is Wolf Point. That red Lego brick looking thing is this building. The little bump on the left of it is the map. We didn't used to talk about this building, another big black box, fascinating, but they spent 800 grand putting that map there, and they put themselves on the map by putting the map on themselves. We started doing these riverboat tours in the year 2000, so a lot of these buildings from after the year 2000 were designed for your very eyeballs from this very angle on this very boat. This is all for you. Don't you feel lucky? And now we are coming up on the south part of the South Branch. Here on the right is the old post office. This was very briefly the largest building in the world for about 1 month before they finished the merchandise mart a few blocks to the north. You may recognize the old post office from its Hollywood career. This post office played a bank in the 2008 Batman movie, The Dark Knight. Specifically the bank that gets robbed by the Joker and his wicked Joker gang with the zip lines in the opening scene. A year later, they spent $1 billion turning it into offices, and now it is a big office complex for companies like Uber, Walgreens, PepsiCo, Milwaukee Tools, Ferrari Chocolate, and whatever else it says on that sign. Right here, where the highway meets the railroad, they also have a 3.1 acre park on top of that thing. I'm sure the sunset views are pretty cool. And now we got a different type of steel, a different type of noise. We can only be under the interstate highway. To the west, this is the Congress Parkway, which goes to Kansas City, Missouri. To the east, this is Ida B. Wells Drive. Ida B. Wells was a journalist from Mississippi. She came to Chicago to cover the World's Fair in 1893, was not planning on staying, but she found a community, she found an audience, she found a vibe, and she found a home. Ms. Wells became one of the pioneers of the Great Migration when millions of black Americans moved from rural communities in the South to urban communities in the North, like Chicago. A lot of what makes Chicago, Chicago. The music, the jazz, the blues, the rock and roll, the food, the fashion, and a whole lot of people came straight up from the Mississippi Delta in trains to Union Station and settled in neighborhoods like Bronzeville. That neighborhood, Bronzeville, the heart of Chicago's black metropolis, is closer to the lake than the river. It is not on our tour, but this is a city of neighborhoods. Every single neighborhood has its own architectural vernacular, and you can read any building like a book. You just gotta know how all those architectural styles tell the stories of people from all over the world who make Chicago their home. Just about every immigration wave in Chicago can be traced to a specific event all over the world in every decade of this young city's short history. And so this is the part of the post office that is still a post office. We got 10 million people in the greater Chicagoland area, 2.5 million in the city, 7.5 million in the suburbs. That's more people than you can really even keep track of. But everyone's got to get their mail on time. Everyone's got to get fresh water. Everyone's got to get food. Everyone's got to get rid of their dirty water. Some of these massive infrastructural projects are just as complicated, just as precise, just as genius as any skyscraper. But if they do their job right, nobody's going to notice. And one of those massive engineering projects is the river itself. It's an impressive river. It's not a real river, though, as I was saying. It's a little more like a moat or like a water trap at a golf course. This is a human project. The river, as it was about 500 years ago, was about 1/5 of the size of this one, and it was not continuous. It was a big human project to blow up all this earth to connect the Chicago River to the Illinois River about 40 miles away. That was a big, big thing right around the year 1900. We still get our fresh water from the lake. That's where the cleanest water around here is. That was also true in the 1800s, but the river flowed into the lake, so it was sort of a sewer. It was a trash heap. People were getting sick. People were getting cholera. You know, stuff from the stockyards, the city-sized slaughterhouses was going into where the water comes from. So we had to blow up all this land, massive dynamite project. We were able to get the sewage out of the lake and down towards St. Louis where it belongs. St. Louis did sue the city of Chicago. They did not want our sewage for some reason. We won. The Supreme Court said no wrongdoing admitted. Chicago was undefeated, greatest city of all time. But that's how we saved the water supply, and we included enough lake water with the sewage that it was not deadly. Jumping back to the 1980s, now we got River City right here. Bertrand Goldberg's sequel to Marina City recognized that concrete-based corn anatomy, and those two north towers, which are designed to look like grain elevators, the first skyscrapers in Chicago history. This is also another city within a city with the marina on bottom. They got a bubbler in there to keep the water moving so it doesn't freeze in the wintertime. Also a couple businesses. They got a venue, they've got the daycare, they've got a grocery store. The original plan was way more ambitious. Goldberg wanted this to go all the way down to Roosevelt Boulevard, 1.8 miles in all. Hundreds of thousands of people living in multiple corn towers in like a Star Trek style city of the future. He was thinking big and then even bigger than that about the future after poverty, after hunger, after despair, where we would just be focused on sort of filling up our free time, just stacking college degrees for our whole lives. He included, annexes for adult learning, thinking so big, and I love that because thinking big is not just about thinking tall. You can think big in any direction, psychologically, psychedelically. So that Star Trek future